date and news analysis. I have been observing the Wall Street protests for quite some time. In fact, I've been tracking the internet promotion of these protests before they actually began. And I did a series of blog blasts, Paul McGuire Intelligence e-blasts, which you can subscribe to for free at paulmcguire.org. And I wrote a number of articles, and we sent up a number of Paul McGuire TV YouTubes on the subject before it happened. Well, there are large protests in Manhattan outside of Wall Street. Those protests have spread across the nation. Now, the interesting development, because I was observing the anonymous campaign, and that's a very, very, very sophisticated internet campaign, which they call themselves anonymous. And then I observed the actual demonstrations, and I noticed that what appeared to be the original intent of the demonstrations was subverted. So instead of it being demonstrations against the Federal Reserve System and related international banking entities and the Council on Foreign Relations and so on, it suddenly became, through deliberate, strategic, organized efforts by very powerful groups, the elite, and we know who their names are, it became anti-bank demonstrations. It became pro-Obama demonstrations. And with the influx of the massive power of the unions, the nature and the content and the message of these demonstrations has been transformed. Instead of being a populist message or a libertarian message or a conservative message or even a constitutional message, it has been subtly transformed into a leftist socialist message. Now, I want to talk about something that I think is of great importance to you, and that is the concept of, and I know this is going to be frightening and disturbing to some people, but really, you got to get over it. We are in the future that science fiction authors dreamed of. I don't. Maybe you're out there with a Little House on the Prairie with covered wagons, but we're in the future, man. Get used to it. Now, I happened to watch a movie the other night. I don't recommend it for everybody. It's a disturbing and violent movie, and it was called Hannah. And it was about a girl who was, I guess, around 12 or 15 or whatever, but she had secretly had her DNA enhanced in a laboratory. She was part of an intelligence community experiment, and these transhumanism, post-human laboratories actually are in existence right now, and if you're not aware of them, you could be. I deal with it in my new DVD series, Are You Ready for the Coming One World Government? Are You Ready for the Coming One World Economic System? And Are You Ready for the Coming One World Religion at paulmcguire.org. These experiments where they take human DNA and they enhance it to breed superhumans. Now, they can do that by mixing animal-human DNA. Some people speculate that Nephilim DNA and human DNA and animal-human DNA is being mixed. But let's just say it's human DNA. They're growing, or they're tinkering with the genetic code to produce super soldiers. So this girl had all these unusual powers, unusual strength, the ability to fight without sleeping or without eating, etc., etc. And I don't want to ruin the end of the movie for you, but it exposes these developments. This coincides with the science, that's the science of transhumanism. Now, we also have the science of brainwashing or mind control. A lot of people don't realize that the science of mind control has grown exponentially just as fast, if not faster, than the science of biotechnology or the science of computer technology. So what we have in America and what we have in other nations around the world, both communist nations and Western nations, we live in a artificial society. The culture that you and I live in is a strategically created culture designed by master planners that began with the Fabian socialists in the late 1800s by science fiction authors like H.G. Wells, who wrote, by the way, a book called The New World Order and Blueprint for a Revolution. And he talked about a coming one world government, a coming one world currency. And then people like Aldous Huxley, who wrote the book Brave New World, actually talked about a utopia, except it was a dark utopia where people would be controlled to such an extent that they would love their own servitude or slavery with drugs and brainwashing and mind control. Now, if you think mind control is simply a matter of some kind of MK Ultra experiment where you get strapped to a chair and it's trauma-based torture programming where you create trauma or torture and then you use LSD and sleep deprivation and then hypnosis to produce a Manchurian Candidate style population. Well, the science of brain control or mind brainwashing is light years into the future from that kind of scenario. Now, I'm going to suggest something to you that may be a little bit difficult for some of you to handle. In fact, you may go into a state of cognitive dissonance because your mind is going to have to disassociate from the information that I'm giving you because it's too intense and you become overwhelmed. A classic symptom of somebody who's been brainwashed is their immediate reaction is kind of a very intense denial and anger. You see, if what I was talking about was simply in the realm of idiocy, you would laugh, like I was telling you a story of the Easter Bunny, or Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, or any number of fairy tales. But if I'm telling you something that is fictitious, then the normal human response would be to laugh it off. But because people get angry, and anger is the revealer that I am touching on something in your subconscious core, which elicits the fact that you know deep down inside that you have been programmed and you are part of what I term American culture, as cultures in Europe and the Russia and other places, China, of course, are really what I call mass Manchurian brainwashing experience. Now, we're not talking about the programming of assassins. I'm talking about mass mind control. The Soviet Union, or the former Soviet Union, called it psychopolitics. And whether we're talking about simple social engineering in the school system, which is very subtle, and it's simply thought reform done through education, developed by John Dewey, the father of modern public education, who went to communist Russia in the 1920s, came back and founded modern public education, and Dewey said these words. He said, the purpose of public education is not to educate. Listen carefully. He said, John Dewey said, the purpose of education is to indoctrinate. Now, I hope you caught the full intent of Dewey's strategy because he controls the thinking of your children in what we call mind control factories. Here's the deal. The deal is that these demonstrations are not spontaneous. Although they declare, they reveal a degree of spontaneity, and they are the explosive reaction to the pent-up frustrations of the American people who see their dollar devalued and their prospects for employment gone, especially young people, and the dismal economic future which appears to lie ahead. So there's a reaction which we can expect. But here's the danger. Now, I was reading an interview with the former KGB mind control specialist, and he was talking about how the Soviet Union strategized and how they would take over our nation through psychological warfare. And he talked about the phases, and the initial phase is to break down the culture, break down family, break down religion, break down, belief in George Washington, the Constitution, and so on and so on. And then as you get into the third stage, let's go to the third stage. In the third stage, you demoralize the culture. And that happens through economic crisis like we're in now. And then the final stage is crisis. Now, we are currently in the demoralization stage, but the next stage that's coming, and you need to be aware of it, is called crisis. Now, this crisis could occur through a natural disaster, an incredible earthquake. There are reports of seismic activity in New Zealand that scientists are actually terrified of, because the potentiality, and I want to emphasize the word potentiality, it's not a done deal, of the seismic activity surrounding the Canary Islands and the New Zealand earthquake activity has the potential of producing a volcanic seismic tsunami that would send a massive wall of water, I think they estimated 500 feet high, across the entire ocean, flooding the entire east coast of the United States of America, and creating massive floods of biblical proportions. No, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's a potentiality. So crises could come in the form of natural disaster. It could come in the form of a terrorist attack, such as a nuclear weapon going off in a U.S. city. That's a very real possibility. I wrote about that in my books, Are You Ready? And The Warning, and other books. That's a possibility. We have the possibility of floods, which we've seen, hurricanes, freak weather. I'm not going to get into the issue of weather modification weapons because I personally believe the level of freak weather we're seeing can't be attributed to technology. It's got to be something bigger than that. The other thing is it could be a manufactured crisis, or it could be an economic collapse, engineered or accidental or whatever. That transforms America into a totalitarian state. One of my mentors, Dr. Francis Schaeffer, said these words, and I want you to listen to them carefully. He said, authoritarianism, either from the right or the left, will have to arise to manage the chaos. In other words, you can't get hung up on the right or the left paradigm. Both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are controlled by the Council of Foreign Relations. And you're incredibly naive if you think, with a few exceptions, that you have a viable choice. Essentially, you're getting the choice between Council on Foreign Relations Candidate A or Council on Foreign Relations Candidate B. And the CFR agenda, which is one world government, one world currency, and one world religion, that's the end game, and that fits into Bible prophecy. That's why we are racing to finish, and we'll be finished very soon. And you can still pre-order my new 3 DVD series called Are You Ready? For the coming one world government, the coming one world economic system, and the coming one world religion. These are all on going into a convergence phase. Now, what do you do about it? I've just given you a snippet